with Candace Bester. Tonight, I have another special guest that I'm going to be interviewing, and her name is Susan Harnett. Susan is a divorce and family law mediator. She's also a parent counselor, a mom of two, and very soon to be mom of three. So every week we come onto this podcast and we interview people that have got inspirational stories and really that they've gone through some really tough stuff and they have got stuff to share with us. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Susan. Welcome, Susan.
Hello, Candace. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good, thank you.
Susan, I'd love you to tell us all about Susan.
Okay. So, oh, I didn't start my journey out this way. I was in hospitality for 20 years. I loved doing events. It was my passion. And just Christmas Eve in 2015, the bombshell hit me that my husband was leaving me. And I had two small little kids and I wasn't prepared. I didn't have any idea it was going to happen. And it threw me into a rabbit hole of all the things that happened after that. So being an event organizer, thinking I was really, really organized, I learned I wasn't so organized. And basically with the separation, I learned that divorce is ugly. And there's generally not a good divorce or separation breakup. So I learned. I went through some court battles. We witnessed a little bit of parental alienation. My children were formally removed by courts and reunified, but it's quite a harsh battle. And through that, I decided I can't let other people live like that. And sort of like the AA principle, the 12th step is to help others. I stuck into studying and I studied divorce and family law mediation. I was almost a specialist by the time I started because everything that you learn, I'd had thrown at me anyway.
There's no better teacher than experience, is there?
Well, I mean, during the course, I just go, oh, I remember that happening. That happening. And that's what brought me to where I am today, because I believe fully that if we can mediate situations so people don't have to go through the system, the court system, it's better for the children and it's better for the parents. So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay. So, like I said, there's definitely no better teacher than experience. And what a lovely story to know that you've turned this into something that can help other people. I really, really love stories like that. And for me, we're obviously going to discuss the problem. We're going to there's lots of people that are on this podcast every week that are going through divorces, that are experiencing a lot of the stuff that you've already spoken about. But I really want to be able to give them some kind of a solution, if nothing else, some hope that when they leave here today, that they maybe just feel, even if it's just a little bit lighter. So let's speak about that very term that you mentioned very quickly, parental alienation syndrome.
Yes.
What is parental alienation syndrome?
Well, so Susan definition, let's put that in inverted commas, is it's child abuse, full stop. It's basically pouring poison on the child's brain about another parent. It's withholding access. It's basically making your child internalize and believe bad things about the other parent. But the reason I believe it's child abuse so severely is because a child believes they're half mom, half dad. And how you're teaching a child to hate half of themselves. And that's why
goosies.
Yeah, I often get the question, which parent do you want to live with, your mother or your father? And I look at the parents and I go, well, which hand do you want to cut off, your left or your right? Don't you need both?
It's just something that is just, I can't even begin to fathom it. So with regards to that, I can so relate because I did mention that I was a teacher for 18 years. And it's so interesting because obviously we were brought up with the whole idea, the fairy tale idea that kids that live in in a home with mom and dad living in the same home. That's the ideal situation. But in actual fact, through my personal experience, what I learned was it didn't matter as long as the children had their mom and their dad. It actually had nothing to do with them living in the same home. That was a big thing for me. And then the children who were struggling, I would always go back to their files, and there was always a correlation with they only have access to one parent, whether that be the father or the mother. So when parents do this, and when they alienate their child, and when they poison their child against the other parents, they literally are creating so many problems.
Yeah.
And the weirdest thing, and I think I've mentioned this in a podcast before, is they use their own relationship with their ex as a basis for what they do. So they say, our relationship was toxic, so that means I need to protect my kid from their own father or their own mother, which is just crazy because it's never the same relationship as what they have with the kids. So
It's actually a
sad.
sickness. It's almost a sickness, because a child will never have the same relationship with a mother and a father. And parents actually bring different qualities to parenting styles with their kids. Mother cannot always be the nurturer and the disciplinarian. You need both sides. So it's actually important that children have access to both parents.
What's interesting, just to go a little bit off the path, is that when we were chatting about this earlier on, you said that it doesn't have to be between like the parents. It doesn't parental alienation. Can you tell me more about that?
Yes. So what I was saying to you is we like to use the term child alienation, because it could happen to grandparents. A mother could be fighting with her mother, and then all of a sudden decides to cut her mother out of the child's life. And this child starts to feel abandoned, because now they don't understand, wow, these people, I'm not seeing them. Don't they love me anymore? And they don't realize that it's a relationship between the mother and her mother, or her father, or say the in-laws. And the child feels like it's been abandoned. And it goes to aunts and uncles. Anybody that the child has a relationship with and then is ripped away is alienation. And the child doesn't see it as parents having a fight or adults having a fight. The child internalizes it as, what have I done wrong that this person no longer loves me? And that's the severity of it. The parents go, I'm not going to let them see because, we had a braai and we had a fight. It's not about that. It's the child going, how come I'm not loved anymore? And it develops problems. It develops problems later on. And it's almost, I think I mentioned to you, it's almost one of the main root causes of addiction, because of fragmented families. And the child starts to feel internally there's something to bandage up and fix. Why am I being abandoned? Why am I not good enough? Adults don't realize the complications that they're causing for the children.
That's so sad. Something that's just popped into my head is, and this actually works both ways. So it works for both parents that are going through this. I always used to think, you know what? I get the fact that resentment doesn't serve you. So you must forgive people as much as what you can. And then I used to tell myself that there are some resentments that are justified. Okay, so this one is the justified one. So this is the one because they've done this and they've done this and they did this and this and this and this. And then I read a quote, which is one of my favorite, and it says, the definition of resentment is drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die.
Yes.
So when it's again from the emotional side, when I'm thinking about the parent who's alienating the other parent, the best thing you can ever do is to learn, I don't care how, but is to learn how to forgive, because you're actually poisoning everything around you and the damage that is being caused. So that's the horrible stuff. Okay. So it's really a horrible thing. Now, you obviously deal with lots of families and divorces. And so I'd love to go through what are some of the very common things that you see. Okay. And then what is it that you would like to recommend? So if two parents come to you and they want you to mediate, what are some of the things you see and what would you like to recommend? Advice.
The thing that strikes me the most And I can't tell you I'm any different, because in my initial split, I had the idea that fathers saw their children every second weekend for the weekend and once during the week. That was normal. It's not normal. A child is not a pot plant. They don't just get planted all over the place whenever the parents feel like it. So I often have to explain to both parents, guys, parenting is 50-50. It took two of you to make this baby. It takes two of you to bring this child up. And you
Is
got
that
to
sometimes a shock for them?
huge. It was a shock
Wow.
for me when I started my journey. I didn't know. And I often will speak to someone that's busy going through the initial stages of a split. And during the psychology of a breakup, you're going through the stages of grief because you're grieving losing your partner. And you always see the mother's always going, yeah, but I have custody of the child. And I'm trying to explain there's no such thing as custody anymore.
Wow.
Firstly, and secondly, you need to work out what's going to work best for your child. There's nesting, which is a situation where you buy a house and the children live in the house permanently and the parents move in once a week. Okay, so the mum moves into the house once a week, then the dad moves into the house once a week, and then they go to their
Don't tell my kids about that. They're going to totally opt for that.
It doesn't work for everybody, because
Yeah.
in my case, it wouldn't work because my ex lives overseas. But
yeah,
there's
yeah.
other options. It's 1 week, 1 week. That doesn't always work for children because it's so disruptive. You with with mommy for 1 week, then you with daddy for 1 week. There's a 4-3 split, 4 days, 3 days, very disruptive. So it depends on the child. It depends on their resilience, which children are very resilient.
Yeah.
It depends on the situation. It depends. It's the same with maintenance. I was involved in an argument this morning where somebody was going, yeah, that isn't enough maintenance. And I was looking at them going, but that maintenance isn't a salary. Maintenance is this.
Oh, interesting.
You know?
Yes, it's for the children, actually. You have to still bring your part.
In fact, maintenance is just as much 50-50 or as depending on your salary and your expenses. So the other thing that I find people really don't understand is that maintenance and contact are two different issues. So a mother or a father will say, they don't pay maintenance, so I don't let them see the kids. I then say to them again, please put yourself in the child's position. So you telling that child they must be bought, firstly. And secondly, it's a different issue. You can't withhold the contact with the parent just because they aren't paying maintenance. Just as much you shouldn't hold maintenance from a parent because you don't see them. So it works both ways. But the law is clear. It's different. And those are the two main issues that we deal with. It's people not understanding that it's actually the child they need to think of and not them. And the divorce is tough. The separation is tough. But the kids shouldn't be drawn into it. Mommy and daddy
and very, very rarely is the parent actually an issue. Like what percentage? Tiny,
if I had to tell you how much money I would make if I did protection orders for a living, because often the parents will come to me and go, yeah, I'm going to lay a protection order because of this, this, and this. And I look at them and I go, okay, are you really afraid? Do you really feel like you're in danger? Because protection orders just get run for. And, these fights, and I can tell you from my own experience, and my kids can tell you, that the fight that we went through was so toxic that it affected them and it will affect them for the rest of their life. And the lawyer's fees and the therapy fees alone are not worth it. If parents could just understand, and maybe we should put it as part of marriage counseling or couples counseling prior to having kids, that when there's a breakup, remember your kids come first. And they don't deserve, they really just don't deserve the fighting. They don't deserve to have a mom and a dad going, you're not paying maintenance, you're not paying, you're not letting me see my kid. It shouldn't be like that. Even for me, I had to learn that. So I'm also human. I also had to learn it. But if I could be so clear with people, just understand that, especially the little ones and teenagers, formative years, don't put them in the middle of your fight. And that's why I advocate for mediation.
Absolutely. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about divorce? Because, I believe that we carry so much that's just beliefs that have just been passed on and passed on and passed on. And until we look into them and until we start going, you know what? This is not serving us. This is serving us. Let's get rid of the ones that aren't. Let's reframe them and let's make it more beneficial. But one of the things that I find that I see a lot is I have to fight. So I have to fight is the biggest misconception. Because at the end of the day, when you're coming in with that energy, good luck with that. I know that when I'm fighting, I don't ever get the results that I want. So I would love to change that to you need to calm down and then you need to proceed in an adult manner, not like a child.
Let me tell you something funny. When I started training as a mediator, I was so strict. Like somebody would say something and I would stop them in their tracks. You can't speak to that person like that. And my lecturer actually stopped me and he said, Susan, the aim of mediation is to get people to communicate. And they might not be communicating in the healthiest manner, but they're communicating better than they have in a long time. And
it's interesting.
I learned a lot from that because fighting is not communicating because you're not listening, you're just responding. And mediation is sitting you down and actually forcing you guys to discuss. And I've learned in so many cases where, as much as they really dislike each other, they're actually fighting for the same thing. And it sometimes takes a third neutral person just to explain to them, guys, both of you are fighting for your kids. Both of you love your kids. So let's look at it this way.
You're fighting the same fight.
For same fight, but you're just using different words and more toxic towards each other. So definitely, divorce is not easy. It's taken me many years to be able to talk about it without crying. And they say that's when you've healed. And I wake up every morning and it's a new journey. So divorce is never an easy way. I would always say, please try and work things out, even if there's a possibility, not just for the kids, but for yourselves. But if there is just no points of any return, then cooling off period.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to speak about. So, I was saying to Gary when I was interviewing a couple of weeks ago, I said, I think it's in New Zealand that you're not allowed to get divorced for 2 years after you've separated. And I actually think that is the soundest advice ever. Because people think, first of all, I can't get on with my life until I've gotten this over. But if you just calm down and you start to work things out, by the time you actually go through the divorce, you have worked through all your stuff. And you've come to some kind of but obviously it's a little bit more complicated than that because they go like, but I have to have a court involved because I can't see my kid, and it does get more involved in that. But ultimately, the best advice somebody ever gave me after my divorce, they said, give it 6 months. They said, just for 6 months, don't do anything. Look after yourself, love yourself, cherish yourself. But then again, I was very lucky because we were really on the same page. And when you said you've never seen a good divorce, well, I'm sorry, I've got that story.
You see, those ones generally don't come to us.
Yeah, exactly. We don't even have to go there.
No, in South African law, believe it or not, you have to live apart for a year as well. Yeah, so you have to be estranged for a year. There's no I've forgotten all the legal terms. I've been doing parenting counseling today, wrong one. But there's a new law that's just been passed, actually new acts, and basically what it is that you can't approach the High Court without going for mediation first. That's
brilliant.
It is brilliant because I was tied up in litigation for 7 years and it was unpleasant and it was costly. And unfortunately with litigation, it forces you to fight. And that litigation actually caused more problems than the mediation would have been if that act was already there. So it has been in the making for many, many years, but I think they're now starting to enforce it where at magistrates court, you can still get divorced, but if you go to the high courts, there's, I think it's called a Rule 41A, and they now send you for mediation before you can actually start that. So I think that's a really good one. I think mediation, because it's the duty of a mediator to actually, it's called reality checking. And sometimes we have to sit with the parents separately in a side meeting and say, look, what is the best outcome and what is the worst outcome? And if you're already living your worst outcome, then it's possible that, don't go for litigation. But a lot of people choose litigation because they want to fight the other person, and they don't really realize the impacts that the kids go through. So I think there's many things on paper that are really good.
Yeah. Isn't it always like that, eh? So we've got Gary here from Fathers for Justice, and he said the concept of the cooling off period is vital, but the contact, it's just moved, and the contact and care of the children must be automatic at points of separation. And that, I think, where the tricky part comes in. You know, there's so much anger, there's so much emotions, and this is where I come in. So obviously I'm the emotional side, the EQ, and I think that the biggest thing that's being missed in this entire thing is literally emotional support, personal development, absolutely everything to do with self-care, self-love, because when you've got to tend to yourself before you can actually literally go through anything. What would you like to say with regards to the emotional side of this?
You know, there's groups available for people that are going through the emotional side of divorce. When I was studying the psychology for mediation, I read something called tribal warfare. I learned about something called tribal warfare. And I thought, why does nobody know about this? This is an emotional side where basically in the splits, one person gets, I don't want to say alienated because it's the word in my head, but it's basically where a whole tribe, could be the family, it could be the friend, turns on the person and actually guns them. And I thought, well, that happened to me. Why did nobody know that? I mean, I dealt with social workers. I dealt with child psychologists. I dealt with, a lot of professionals that were involved. And I thought, they all learn this. Why did they not realize that this is what's happening? And I see that happening with parental alienation, where you get a whole community that turns on the one person because of a false allegation. And that emotionally breaks a person, because how are you supposed to fight when you're going through the mourning of a child that is still alive? I mean, that is the hardest thing I can explain to anybody. Mourning a person where you have closure is one thing, but mourning a person that's still alive, mourning a child, losing a child is a big deal. But mourning a child that's still alive, and I've heard fathers or mothers say, I can't remember their laugh. I can't remember their voice. And you're going, and that child is breathing the same air that you are breathing. And it's just the most traumatic thing to go through. And then on top of all of that, you have to be plain-faced in front of all people. And I think it's an impossible feat. And that's why I think this is such an evil syndrome. I think that is why parental alienation, which is actually child alienation, is so evil.
Yeah.
I think that's why it becomes so toxic.
So Miss Positivity over here is always one to say, when you go through the absolute worst time, you get the absolute biggest gifts. Are you able to look back already and say, these were my breakthroughs, these were my gifts, or is it still a little bit too soon?
I think that sometimes even myself, and I've been through countless therapy to try and verbalize how my feelings were. I don't think I'll ever be able to deal with what actually happened. I think that you push it down so deep into your subconscious. My kids were actually at therapy today for it, and I'm trying to encourage them to talk about what they went through their ordeal. but I don't think I will ever, maybe one day I'll be able to deal with it. But I think I've learned, I've tried to turn it into a positive. I've tried to be able to coach other people, but it's one of the most horrific things. I've experienced death, I've experienced divorce, but the parental alienation is the worst possible feeling to ever go through. So I think definitely therapy that you need to go for, but I don't even know if we have the correct coping techniques to deal with this kind of, I can't call it anything other than abuse.
Yeah. What's standing out for me is maybe the minute this happens, wouldn't it be great if we could have a full on program or just something that they can throw themselves into if we were overseas that the state paid for. But here, that definitely isn't going to happen. That just literally just emotionally supports you through this very, very rough time. So you might not be able to find it, but I can find at least one positive. And I'm not saying, and I'm not downplaying the fact that it was terrible. I can never imagine how terrible that must be. I don't get my kids for 1 week and it feels terrible. By day 5, I'm feeling horrible. By day 6, by 7, I'm like a little bit of a wreck. So I can't even begin to imagine. But the fact that you have had the inner strength to turn this into a positive, as opposed to sitting there and saying, poor me, poor me, poor me, and becoming bitter and poisoning people against it. I think that is such a dangerous thing because it really doesn't serve us. But it's difficult because when you're in the throes of it and it feels, and the anger and the resentment and the bitterness. So it really, really is difficult. I see Stuart. How's it, Stuart? He says we have 2 psychologists here in KZN that identify with and report on parental alienation. So that's obviously what they specialize in. Okay, can you keep one and then can you send one our way? And yes, Stuart, you do still owe me a hoodie. And I agree, it is child abuse. It totally is child abuse. I think what we must do is we must just be very careful of the words that we use. And I'll tell you why I say that. Because thinking that somebody's never going to get over something, if you think about it, that can't be 100% accurate because people have been through the worst of the worst of the worst and they have come out of it and they have lived. They've been inspirational, successful. And I do have a theory that the kids that are sheltered and the kids that are protected and that they go through life with very few struggles, the minute something comes their way as an adult, they crumble.
Yeah.
So as much as we don't want our kids to go through this, and obviously we would never choose it. You would never, ever choose it. We do know, like you said, kids are just so much more resilient and they just need a flipping big high five and a pat on the back because they are so much stronger, even stronger than us.
Absolutely. No, look, I think you will get through it, and also I think it makes us much stronger. I am completely a different person to what I was before the whole ordeal. And I've seen other people that have gone through it and also are so strong and they're so eager to help other people because they don't want those people to go through the same thing. So there's definitely positives. It's just,
definitely.
it's the walk that you have to do.
So what got you through your hardest times? I need us to, okay, we've spoken, now let's give some practical advice, tips that we can help people with. What are some of, like, for example, I will tell you categorically that starting your day with meditation is a game changer. When you start your day and your very first thoughts are, this is my reality, you create a day from hell. So for me, I know a lot of people are anti-meditation, but I know. I mean, the scientific research behind it. Release of stress, anxiety, making clearer choices, being able to deal with difficult things, bouncing back from adversity. That all comes from starting your day in a clear headspace. So that definitely would be my number one tip. What would your number one tip be?
And Also, one of those things I thought was very silly was daily affirmations. When you say walk the walk, let me tell you, just the first one I ever had, it sounds so silly, but it was just, I am enough. And just saying that to myself every day. I studied. I mean, that's how I got through my ordeal. I went and studied everything. I studied the Children's Act. I studied divorce law. I just went and studied as much as I could to get through it. But that daily affirmation did so much more. Saying, I am going to get my kids back. I am going to get through this. And I did.
And that's exactly it. So I don't know why this lady always comes up in my podcasts, but I don't know if you know Brene Brown.
No.
Okay. She is so amazing, but she says we live in a society of not enough. So I'm not enough. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough skills. I don't have enough resources. So we do live in a society of lack. So it is a program that's just been programmed in ourselves. So the affirmations would definitely help with that. And in the beginning, it doesn't feel like it doesn't land in the beginning. But the more you say it, it definitely starts to resonate. Because remember, these are your subconscious thoughts, which are 90% of what's going on in your head. You don't even know that it's happening. So we need to reprogram those subconscious thoughts. So affirmations, meditation, another thing which I've mentioned on my podcast before, but it is a game changer for me, and I use it so much with my clients. I don't know if you've ever done tapping.
No.
Okay. So tapping works with your meridians. It's very similar. Well, it's the same points, like pressure points, as acupuncture. It's a Chinese philosophy. But basically, as you know, we are built, we're just an energy field. So when you have gone through a very tough time, you are stuck energy. So your energy is stuck. And in order to get that energy flowing, it's a very specific thing. You can Google it. So you can say, tapping for anxiety, and then something will come up on YouTube, or tapping for self-love, or tapping for self-doubt, or tapping for anger, or literally whatever you're going through at the time, you Google it, and then you just listen to what they're saying and you repeat it. So it's like, I love and even though I'm going through this hard time, I love and accept myself. And so it's a bit of a affirmations as well. But then you tap on all the different pressure points or whatever that is. And the biggest, and there's also one on your collarbone, under your arm. And the quickest shift that I found in people to find it easier to get out of bed and to just have that little bit more of energy is because of tapping. So it's very, 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 very powerful. That's very, very cool. Yeah, so there's got to be more. On your hardest days, what did you do to get through the day? I mean, you're standing on the other side and you have a smile on your face. Please.
I do now. I was talking to a mom today. She's also going through quite a rough time. She's how do I put this? Okay, she's also had her children removed, and also false allegations, but dangerously close to the truth. So she's struggling. It's actually such a sad thing because she really cared about her child and she was worried about her child, took the child to hospital, and they've now accused her of Munchausen's disease, which is also quite severe.
If you can tell us what that is, because lots of people don't.
Okay, so it's basically when you cause unnecessary medical procedures on your child. Typically, it could be that you add blood to the urine so that the doctors will do extra tests and stuff. Sometimes it's invasive tests, sometimes it's non-invasive, but it's quite hectic. And she's sort of in the dark, and I'm trying to explain to her, okay, well, this is the process, and I know that you're angry, and I know that you're feeling these feelings, but you need to work with the system in this case. You know, in my case, I also fought the system, and I came off second best for a while until I realized, okay, you've got to be uniform, and just until you get your kids back. And I explained to her, we don't, as a mother that went through it, it happens to so many people. They don't always explain what's going to happen next. And the one day your children are removed and you don't know when you're going to speak to them again. If you can speak to them, you're just not allowed to go near them. And she's at the point where she's at telephonic contact once a week. So now you must imagine having your kids with you every day, like you would have in a normal relationship, and then there's a breakup, and then you only get access to your kids once a week. The kids don't understand what's happening. She didn't understand. I had to explain supervised visits, the reason for them. It's mandatory. Then it's after supervised visits, it goes to unsupervised if the social workers say it's okay. And then it goes to an overnight stay, and then it goes to a weekend stay, and it's slowly integrating back. And she also, like me, didn't understand. And unfortunately, that's the way the system works. That's the way it has to go. It's a reintegration thing. And she was going, but they were removed. He was removed 25 days ago, and when do I see my kid again? And I was going, I can't tell you that. I wish I could tell you that. I wish I could. And she's so confused because all she was doing is loving this child and thinking she's doing the best for her child. So, there's so many different things that happen and so many different aspects. So, imagine you're a father and the mother decides she's having an affair and she's moved away, and there's absolutely no reason why you can't see the child. But because of the new relationship, she doesn't want you to, because she's the guilty party, and guilt has a big part of that. All of a sudden, the children are whipped away from the father and they don't get to see their child, but then once every second weekend. So, there's just so many factors to it, and it's just such an unfair, it's toxic. I don't actually know what else to say about it.
Yeah. So I just want to read some of our messages here. So Lauren says, it's the most informative podcast every Thursday, and we learn so much. So thank you. Thank you, Lawrence. And then we have Stuart was saying that we can message him if we want. Maybe Stuart, let me just open the chat here. He says he's got the number of the psychologist if you're looking for the parental alienation psychologists. Do you want to put it in the chat, Stuart, and then it should come up on the screen? And then some people were saying how they coped. I was saying a lot. My mom said to me, always saying I think it was Richard. He says he threw himself into work. Yeah, Richard said that he threw himself into work. And then Stuart said that there's going to be a massive Fathers for Justice presentation in Umhlanga on the 22nd of September, and it's free for everybody to attend. So Stuart will be sending that message now. One of the things I want to definitely say, and I have to say it before we leave because I can't go without saying it, is we must choose our words very carefully, because I believe, and I've proven it again and again, that words become things. So, for example, if you wake up in the morning and you say, I'm tired, guess what? You will 100% be tired. I've proven this again, and I have a few stories that I'd love to share, is that my mom was very sick in early on this year with COVID. And she was in hospital for 3 weeks. Then she came home for a little bit, and then she went back into hospital. And the one day I just said to her, Mom, what is it that you're saying to yourself? What is it? Come, let's work on your words. Let's work on your words. And she just started to say things like, says it's going to restore. Okay, so continue. Anyway, 3 days later, she started for oxygen. +4 79212 954. Number has given us the code 47379212954. Thank you very, very much. And if anything that I'm going to take away from today is people need to know once again that they're not alone and that there is support for them out there. Don't think you need to do it on your own. And just a group like this, Fathers for Justice, everybody's going through the same thing. Belong to the herd and be with people who know what you're going through. So I don't know if there's anything else you wanting to say.
No, I'm
Nothing
good.
that's popping to your mind. Okay, cool. But thank you very much for sharing your story. It takes a lot of guts, especially when it comes to something so personal. And when it comes to your children, I believe that's the most difficult. But I'm sure that your story has inspired people to just keep going and to know that with the, it might pass, and exactly like you did, you're on the other side of it, thank goodness. And there are lots of stories like that. So thank you, Susan. You've been a
It's
star.
a pleasure. Thanks, Candace.
Thank you so much. So thank you, everybody. And I think I'm going to have to do these kind of interviews every week, because when it comes to divorce and mediation, and I have the biggest support group and the most amount of messages on this podcast. But join us again next week, Thursday, at exactly the same time. And we will be having another inspirational interview with somebody. And it is always a story of personal growth and what they've learned and how they've gotten through things. And who knows, maybe things will resonate. So thank you for joining, and I shall see you next week.